Hello everybody. So after a quite long break, Perfusionist Classroom is back again. So today we are going to discuss about neurological adverse effect of CPB, that is cardiopulmonary bypass. So we all know that cardiopulmonary bypass affects each and every part of our body, each and every organ. So it will affect our neurological system as well. So today we'll see more deeply what are the effects on our neurological system by cardiopulmonary bypass. So first, let's see types of injury that is caused by cardiopulmonary bypass. First is type 1. Type 1 is cerebrovascular accident or CVA. We all know that CVA, that is stroke, mainly ischemic stroke. Hemorrhagic stroke is rare with cardiopulmonary bypass and is associated with the post-operative bleeding, but ischemic stroke is more common. The next is TIA, that is transient ischemic attack. This is also you can say a form of stroke, but in much lower intensity. So again, ischemic stroke is more common, and this type of stroke can be of two types, that is early or delayed. Early means when neurologic deficit is apparent on emergence of anesthesia, and on the other hand, delayed stroke is the neurological deficit develops after awakening from anesthesia. Now, the rate of incidence of both type of stroke is 50-50. That is, incidence of early stroke and is 50%, whereas incidence of late stroke is also 50%. So they are distributed in half and half. But among them, the stroke that is occurring during the first 24 hours of post-operative period. So between two types of stroke, early and delayed, between these two types of stroke, the delayed stroke, that is this one, delayed stroke that occurs within the first 24 hours of post-operative period is more dangerous than the stroke that occurs in the early period, that is during the anesthetic, during the operation, during the anesthesia. Next is type 2, that is neurocognitive disorder. Neurocognitive disorders are those that causes intellectual impairment, decreased concentration, and decreased retention and processing of new information. That is, their intellectual power, their processing of information, that is something we take that this topic, that is we are reading for the first time, and what we will do, we will process this, all those informations are processed in our brain, and we retain all these informations, but this power is decreased when this type of neurological adverse effects occurs, that is called neurocognitive disorder. And type 3 is encephalopathy. We all know seizure and chorioathetosis. Chorioathetosis is the involuntary movement of limbs, extremities. So these are three types of injury. First, CVA, that is cerebrovascular accident. Second, neurocognitive disorder, and third one is encephalopathy. তো এই তিন রকমের মেন ইনজুরি হয় আমাদের কার্ডিওপালমোনারি বাইপাসের জন্য। তিন রকমের নিউরোলজিক্যাল ডেফিসিট, তিন রকমের নিউরোলজিক্যাল ইনজুরি দেখা যায়। তো রেট অফ ইনসিডেন্স অফ নিউরোলজিক্যাল ইভেন্ট is nearly 1% to 6%. In some selective cases, those those are represented with comorbidities, this incidence rate can be higher. So in average, incidence rate is 1% to 6%. Next we will see the population who are at risk, that is the population who are at more risk. First, the population who are more prone to neurocognitive disorders are the elderly patients, that is patients aged more than 70 years, patients who have hypertension before surgery, before the cardiac surgery, severe carotid artery stenosis, diabetes mellitus, that is sugar, prior cerebrovascular disease, that may be any history of previous stroke or anything else. Next is aortic atheromatosis, that is atherosclerotic plaques in aorta that may dislodge during surgery and they can go into our cerebral circulation and cause ischemic stroke and ischemia in the in the brain. Next is postoperative hypotension and arrhythmias. Next, the population who are more prone to stroke. First is type of surgery. Type of surgery means if the surgery is more complicated, if the disease is more complicated, then the surgery will take much more time. So the duration of ischemia will be much more. Again, if the surgery is valvular surgery, if the patient has valvular calcification, those calcium debris can again dislodge into the circulation, in the systemic circulation, and go to the brain. So type of surgery is a very important factor. Next is cerebral hypoperfusion during cardiopulmonary bypass and hyperthermia during rearming, accidental hyperthermia during rearming. All these are the risk factors. Next we will see the etiology of neurological adverse effects. So let's see the etiology of neurological adverse effect. And the first cause is embolization. So embolization can be due to gaseous microemboli, and gaseous microemboli can be from the open-sided lead circulation, that is called surgical air, and from our side, that is from the oxygenator. Next, embolization can be by foreign material from oxygenator, reservoir and filters, by cotton fibers, silicones, etc. From tubings by spallation. We have already discussed what is spallation. Next, from operative equipments, that is talc, cloth fibers, etc. Embolization can also occur from many components of patient body, that is platelet and neutrophil aggregates, calcium and atherosclerotic debris, and flat globules, intraventricular thrombi, etc. Next cause is hypoperfusion. So hypoperfusion in cardiopulmonary bypass, we always do hemodilution, which causes decrease in hematocrit. So supply of oxygen will be also decreased, and decrease in blood flow with hypothermia we reduces blood flow, and that may cause decreased blood flow much lower than the requirement, which will cause decreased cerebral perfusion pressure and ischemia. And next, the most important part is impairment of cerebral autoregulation, and this is mainly due to the hypothermia that we perform during cardiopulmonary bypass. So in normal average patients, coronary perfusion pressure can be calculated by mean arterial pressure minus intracranial pressure or central venous pressure, which one is greater between them, and coronary perfusion pressure is averagely 70 mm of mercury. Now in our brain, a mechanism occurs, which is called cerebral autoregulation. Cerebral autoregulation is the cerebral blood flow. Cerebral blood flow remains constant, remains sufficient within a range of mean arterial pressure, which is averagely 45 to 100 millimeter of mercury. So between 45 to 100 millimeter of mercury of mean arterial pressure, cerebral blood flow is adequately maintained irrespective of the pressure. This thing is called cerebral autoregulation. Now cerebral autoregulation is hampered during cardiopulmonary bypass because of mainly hypothermia. In moderate hypothermia with alpha-stat management, alpha-stat pH management, what is alpha-stat pH management and what is pH-stat, that we will discuss in some other class in details. In alpha-stat management with mild to moderate hypothermia usually do not impair the cerebral autoregulation. This is called cerebral autoregulatory curve. CBS stands for cerebral blood flow and MAP is mean arterial pressure. So mild to moderate hypothermia with alpha-stat pH management usually does not hamper the cerebral autoregulation, but with severe or deep hypothermia causes cerebral vessels to constrict, that is cerebral vasoconstriction, and that hampers the cerebral autoregulation. And with profound hypothermia induced vasopressis, that is profound hypothermia induced vasoconstriction, this phenomenon is more profound in diabetic patients, and in those cases cerebral autoregulation is hampered, and that causes cerebral hypoperfusion and cerebral ischemia. Next, in cerebral ischemia, one of the most important thing we have to know is what is the watershed area or what is the arterial boundary zones. So in cerebral circulation, the collateral supply occurs by extracerebral or intracerebral anastomosis between the major cerebral arteries, and this is known as arterial boundary zone. Now why it is important? Because rapid severe hypoperfusion can produce ischemic lesion very easily within these boundary zones. These arterial boundary zones or watershed area is very much prone to ischemia other than other parts of brain. So this part can get easily insulted by ischemia, and the frequently affected area is the parieto-occipital sulci located at the limits of the anterior, middle and posterior cerebral arteries. So there may be no global cerebral ischemia, but with some hamper in cerebral autoregulation with very much lower insult by ischemia can cause focal damage to this area. Again, global ischemia may not be present, any global insult to brain may not be present, but this area is very much sensitive and they are much more prone to injury by ischemia. Next is intracerebral or extracerebral atherosclerosis, and the last cause is inflammation. Now inflammation alone, in cerebral inflammation alone, if other causes like embolization or hypoperfusion is absent, then the cerebral inflammation alone in case of cardiopulmonary bypass is usually very minor and causes minor insult. Next we will see the pathophysiology of neurological adverse effect. Next is the pathophysiology of neurologic insult. So first point is lactic acidosis. Now here I have only written down the points, and now I will discuss all the points, but in examination you don't have to write down the discussion, you just write the points, otherwise the answer will be too much lengthy. For understanding, for understanding purpose, I am elaborating these points, so listen carefully. First is lactic acidosis. So we all know in normal aerobic respiration glucose is metabolized and produces 36 moles of ATP, 36 moles of adenosine triphosphate from 1 mole of glucose. Now this is oxidative photophosphorylation, where oxygen is important. That is, oxygen is essential, not only important but essential. Now when there is ischemia and lack of oxygen supply, anaerobic respiration will take place, and what will happen? Only 2 mole of adenosine triphosphate will be generated per mole of glucose, and with that lactate will be produced, and with that hydrogen ion will be produced by anaerobic glycolysis. And when instead of 36 mole of ATP, only 2 mole of ATP will be produced, then the brain will lack ATP, that is the source of energy, which is very much important to maintain the ionic balance in the neural cells. And as a result, what will happen? The function of ATP dependent ion channels will hamper. The main ATP dependent ion channels is sodium potassium ATPase. Now this ion channel will hamper, and ATP depletion will cause loss of ionic gradient, and that will gradually result in cell membrane depolarization and influx of calcium ion by voltage sensitive channels or voltage gated channels. Now intracellular accumulation of calcium will injure the neural cells. Next is free fatty acid. Free fatty acids are neurotoxic. Again, intracellular calcium dependent phospholipase C and A2 will be produced by intracellular accumulation of calcium. So into much more intracellular accumulation of calcium will be there, more the production of intracellular calcium dependent phospholipase C and A2. These are neurotoxic. Next, and it is one of the most important, is glutamate induced excitotoxicity. Now glutamate is a excitatory amino acid. Now when in normal condition, the brain has ability to quickly uptake the extracellular glutamate. And what is the function of glutamate? Glutamate stimulates two kind of receptors which are the modifiers of excitotoxic injury. The main excitotoxic role lies in the ionophore linked receptors, and these include NMDA, that is N-methyl D-aspartate, N-methyl D-aspartate, and AMP. You don't have to remember the names. I have also not remembered it. I am just reading it from the book. So sorry about that. And some other components. Now all these will cause glutamate induced excitotoxicity and more the demand of ATP will increase. Now we have seen that with ischemia the supply of ATP has already decreased, so when glutamate induced excitotoxicity will occur, that will injure the brain cells. And the last one is nitric oxide. We all know that nitric oxide is a free radical which also causes injury to neural cells. Next is monitoring. So to prevent all these ill effects or adverse effects, we have to assess them. We have to assess the patient during and post-operatively. So intraoperatively we can assess the functionality of brain by firstly by monitoring the temperature of brain. Next we can monitor EEG, that is electroencephalogram. Next is BIS, that is bispectral index, NIRS, jugular oximetry, and evoke potentials. These things, these monitorings I will elaborate in some other class where I will discuss about the cerebral monitoring or neurologic monitoring during cardiopulmonary bypass. That is a separate question. And post-operatively we can assess the functionality of brain by MRI and CT scan. The last part, now we will see the last part, the prevention. The last part and the most important part, prevention of neurological adverse effect of CPB. This is the most important part because the knowledge of mechanism, the knowledge of how CPB is injuring the neurological system, all this knowledge will not be purposeful without the knowledge of how to prevent it. As a perfusionist, for us, for the whole surgical team, the most important thing is how to prevent the neurological adverse effect or neurological insults due to cardiopulmonary bypass. So this is the most important part. So first strategy to prevent is to reduce the embolic load. So to reduce the embolic load, first we have to assess if there is extensive aortic atherosclerosis present or not. For that, in modern practice, TE is largely used. TE is transesophageal echocardiography. Next is, if extensive aortic atherosclerosis is present, then alternative site for aortic cannulation must be approached. Otherwise, if the atherosclerotic part of aorta is cannulated, then the sandblasting effect will occur. The sandblasting effect means the dislodgement of atherosclerotic debris due to high pressure or high blood flow from our pump side. Next is decreased number of aortic clamps, again to reduce the chance of dislodgement of aortic atherosclerosis or atherosclerotic plaque. In case of CABG, use of arterial grafts, use of arterial grafts use of arterial grafts will prevent the atherosclerotic debris to dislodge into the brain, because venous graft needed to be anastomosed with aorta. So instead of venous graft, arterial grafts can be used. No-touch technique should be followed for atherosclerotic aorta. If possible, off-pump CABG can be done. And next is proper venting. This is the most important thing, proper venting. Again, if atherosclerosis is not present, then also proper venting is very important to free the circulation from the air bubbles from the heart from the coronary circulation to vent out the air is very much important. Next, from our side, perfusion equipment and strategy, what we can follow? Use of a pre-bypass filter, port size less than 5 micrometer at time of priming. This is not regularly used, very rarely used. That filters of the plasticizers. Next, filters at cardiotomy and venous return point must be used. In modern reservoirs, we all know that they are already incorporated with the reservoir, the venous filter, which we call the venous filter and the cardiotomy filter. Regular use of arterial filter. Arterial filter should be regularly used, because if any debris, any fat globules pass through these two filters, they must not go to the systemic circulation, and that will be prevented by the arterial line filter. Next, reinfusion of cardiotomy sucker blood should be the reinfusion of cardiotomy sucker blood after processing through cell saver. So if cell saver is present, the reinfusion of cardiotomy sucker blood must be done after processing through the cell saver machine, though it will increase the cost of operation. Still, if necessary, this strategy can be performed. To minimize gas bubble formation, we can flush our circuit with CO2, that is carbon dioxide, before priming. During rewarming, gradient before arterial outlet and patient inlet must not exceed 10 degrees centigrade. Arterial blood flow inlet temperature must not exceed 37 degrees centigrade, which is the normal body temperature of human being. During rewarming, sperm flow should be down during cross clamp application and removal to prevent frothing and formation of air bubble, and with that table must be head down and carotid pressure must be applied, so that if any air bubble forms, that cannot go towards the head. Next, cerebral perfusion pressure. So to maintain adequate cerebral perfusion pressure, mean arterial pressure must be always maintained above 50 mm of mercury. Temperature, mild hypothermia with alpha stat management should be followed to delay the flow with the temperature. We must know about the Q10 of brain. Q10 means the reduction of metabolic rate, the relation of metabolism rate and temperature. So for brain, the Q10 is 2.423. That is, the metabolic rate decreases almost more than 50% per degree centigrade. That is, if we reduce the temperature from 37 degree to 27 degree, the metabolic rate of brain, the metabolism rate of brain will decrease more than 50%. But this relation is non-linear, because with reduction of more and more reduction of temperature, this relation decouples. So this relation does not stay linear, but on average we can consider that with 10 degree decrease in temperature, the metabolic rate decreases up to 50%. Next is euglycemia. So hyperglycemia is much injurious for the brain, and we all know during cardiopulmonary bypass, hyperglycemia very commonly occurs, and we have to prevent it by using glucose-free solutions and glucose-free prime for CPP circuit to maintain glucose level somewhere around 180. This is all the surgical and perfusion related techniques, and last one is the pharmacological. So last, the pharmacological protection. In very short, first strategy is metabolic suppression with thiopental, propofol or sevoflurane. They are anesthetic agent. To be more precise, thiopental and propofol is induction agent. Next is calcium channel blockers to block the intracellular accumulation of calcium. Glutamate antagonist, as you have already seen that glutamate excitation is one of the major cause of neurological damage, glutamate excitotoxicity. And next, and the last one is the lidocaine. The function of lidocaine is it reduces the HTM mediated neuronal membrane depolarization. So this is all about the neurological adverse effect and its management during CPB. Hope you all have understood this. If not, you can contact me via comment section or in my FB page. So this is all for the session. Thank you. Stay happy and goodbye.